Week one of college football is in the books, and it's time to take a look at the college football power rankings. Now, these rankings for me will not be a cumulative set of rankings, it'll be a week by week. So it's the 10 best teams from that previous week, and we'll break down each team, what they did, and the performance that gets them into this top 10. Cal had an offensive explosion this weekend. And we kind of expected that with Jake Spavital coming in and running this offense. We knew that this team had the potential to be explosive, and playing a team like North Texas gave them an opportunity to do that. The game was kind of close early on, but Cal found a way to pull away at the end. And it was behind the legs of Jaden Ott. 188 yards and 2 touchdowns led the way for a Golden Bears team that expected big things from him, and he got off to a good start. 669 total yards of offense, 58 points, a huge game for Cal, and a game that hopefully builds some momentum heading into next week. Next week's game against Auburn will be much tougher, and they will need Jay Knott and that offense to be able to score points if they figure they're going to hang around in that game. Oregon put up a monster 81 points against Portland State. And while that win wasn't necessarily the opponent, I should say, wasn't the greatest opponent, putting up 81 points is the highlight of this game. And I think the MVP has to be Puddles, doing 546 total push-ups this game. When you score 81 points, that obviously gets your attention. A lot of high-scoring games this week. But I think that this one stood out as the highlight in terms of 81 points at the FBS level is pretty crazy, no matter who you are playing. And Oregon put on a show. They had multiple players score multiple touchdowns. I think the biggest one is the rushing attack. Featured Bucky Irving with 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jordan James, 86 yards and 3 touchdowns. They also had 2 receivers go over 100 yards, Troy Franklin being one of them. This is the group that I think a lot of people are excited about, but also that defense showcase that it has a lot of talent, maybe a lot of young talent. I think the one that where everyone is keeping an eye on is Mateo Uiagalelei. I think that he has a bright future at defensive end. He could be a major contributor for this Oregon team, and that could be huge with this team's goal of trying to win the Pac-12. It wasn't the best week for the Mountain West, but they did have a number of games that were really exciting. Wyoming had an absolute thriller in which they came back from a 17-0 deficit. It did not look good for the Cowboys early, but they did find a way to pull out a win at home in overtime against a Texas Tech team that a lot of people were high on. I think this is why this game was so impressive. Wyoming was flying under the radar. I don't think a lot of people had them as a team that could win this game or compete in the Mountain West. I was one of those people that believed in this program. I think that this group has a lot of talent, especially on defense, and it showed. This was the defense that slowed down the Texas Tech offensive attack, and it helped them in this game. And then when their offense figured things out, that's when this really got interesting. A 35-33 win, one in which we saw a number of big plays. It was back and forth towards the end, and Wyoming found a way to pull off the upset. Craig Bull does a phenomenal job with this program, and they found a way to pull off a really entertaining upset, one that puts them on the fast track to competing with the best teams in the Mountain West. And there are some good teams in this conference, and Wyoming is definitely one that you need to keep an eye on. Continuing with the Mountain West, Fresno State went into Purdue and pulled off an absolute stunner. I don't think anybody or very few people had this as a win for Fresno State. If you watched my upset alerts and my bets, you would see that I had Fresno State listed as one of those games. I thought that Fresno State could win this game. They have the talent, they have the culture to be able to pull off an upset, and they did exactly that. Mikey Keene came on earlier than expected, and I think that his breakout game was a huge performance, one that Fresno State obviously needed. This was a back and forth game for a while, and in fact, Purdue actually had a 28-13 lead at one point. Fresno State did not go away. Mikey Keene and this offense continued to respond. The go-ahead touchdown was kind of reminiscent of a Jake Haener pass against UCLA. We saw that, and this defense found a way to pull out some stops late in the game, and that's really what sealed it. Fresno State, a phenomenal team, another team that will compete in the Mountain West for a championship, a conference that we knew had the potential to be crowded, but I don't think we saw it early on. And now all of a sudden, with a couple upsets, this is a conference that has multiple teams that can compete for a title. Texas State pulled off arguably the most shocking game in this week. In week one, we saw a number of upsets, we saw a number of strong performances, but I don't think anybody outside of Texas State, even maybe within Texas State, had this one going the Bobcats' way. A 42-31 win at Baylor. The fact that they won on the road was really exciting. We all knew GJ Kinney would take this team to new heights. We just didn't expect it to be this year or in week one. They took control early. They did not look back. They were up 21-6 at one point, and they simply just did not give up that lead. They found a way to put points on the board, 42 of them to be exact. And it started with TJ Finley. The Auburn transfer had a huge game for the Bobcats, 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. And honestly, that was probably the biggest difference. And now we're expecting big things in the Sun Belt, a conference that appears to be up in the air. Is Texas State one of those teams that can compete? We don't know, but we do know this is a team that's not afraid to compete with anybody, including an FBS, a Power Five opponent. Utah started things off on Thursday with a big win over Florida. They did not have Cam Rising, but it didn't seem to matter. This defense was phenomenal. They allowed very few yards, including just 13 yards rushing for the Florida Gators. That was a unit that we expected to do a lot of exciting things and probably still will as the year goes on, but Utah would not allow it. 13 total yards rushing was an impressive performance by this team. A 24-11 win without Cam Rising. The first game, first play, I should say, they sent a message to Florida with a 70-yard touchdown to Money Parks. Perfect play to a player with the perfect name to get things started for Utah. Utah is a team that is looking to defend their crown as back-to-back Pac-12 champions, and they got a strong start against the Florida team. They'll have to figure some things out on offense, but this is a Utah Utes team that you do not want to mess with. Washington took care of business against Boise State, and Michael Penix Jr. got his Heisman campaign off to a great start, 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. His trio of wide receivers played a huge role in that as well. And Boise State was tough in the first half, but it just came down to Washington was the better team, and they found a way to pull away as the game went on. Boise State had no answer to Michael Penix or that passing attack. They just simply could not hang around long enough. And now they find themselves 0-1, and Washington finds themselves looking to compete for a Pac-12 championship. They also hope to be a college football playoff contender. And with a strong start like this, it showed not only do they have the talent, but there's plenty of depth when someone goes down or a team's trying to take one player away. They have other guys that can step up and make life miserable for that team. The beauty of week one is we had football from Thursday through Monday, and Duke finished our week one experience with a thrilling win over Clemson, 28-7 at home. And it was one of the more exciting performances that we saw in week one. The fact that they were able to hold a Garrett Riley offense to just 7 points, the second team to do that this year, the other team being Georgia. Duke and Mike Elko deserve a lot of credit for what they've done defensively. And it was a game in which you saw Clemson struggle to separate from Duke's defensive backs. And that's saying something about both teams. Clemson has a lot of work to do, it seems, and Duke is now on a better track than we expected. I think a lot of people expected Clemson to win this game, and Duke pulled off an absolute stunner. Riley Leonard was phenomenal. He's someone that could be a first round pick when it's all said and done. A strong performance for him, 273 yards and 1 touchdown. This is an offense that played really well and honestly made Clemson look really bad in terms of stopping the run. I think Duke's rushing attack was fairly solid, and that's what helped them win this game. But again, Duke having one of the best games to end week one, a great way to get us into week two. And obviously, the number one team for this week is the Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders already has this team on a great position in terms of getting them to above what they were before. They won just one game last year. They've already matched that. And they did that in spectacular fashion. Shedeur Sanders broke a school record. Travis Hunter played both ways. Dylan Edwards took no time introducing himself to college football, and the defense was opportunistic. Now, they did give up 42 points, but this was still a thrilling win, and it sets up a lot of exciting things for this program going forward. Colorado is looking to make the Pac-12, which was already going to be crowded, even more crowded, and they get a chance to do that against Nebraska next week. So that'll be really fun to watch, but Colorado is the number one team in terms of our power rankings. A really exciting week one, plenty of strong performances, and it's going to be exciting how this list changes in week two.
State and LSU put together a solid first half, and it was the Seminoles who figured things out in the second half. Jordan Travis really came on strong in that second half. He was able to fix something, and it was a really exciting game between both teams. LSU obviously feels like they need to improve upon some things, but so does Florida State. Fortunately, Florida State sits at 1-0, and it was a huge game against another top 10 team. And obviously, the number one team for this week is the Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders already has this team on a great position in terms of getting them to above what they were before. They won just one game last year. They've already matched that. And they did that in spectacular fashion. Shedeur Sanders broke a school record. Travis Hunter played both ways. Dylan Edwards took no time introducing himself to college football, and the defense was opportunistic. Now, they did give up 42 points, but this was still a thrilling win, and it sets up a lot of exciting things for this program going forward. Colorado is looking to make the Pac-12, which was already going to be crowded, even more crowded, and they get a chance to do that against Nebraska next week. So that'll be really fun to watch. But Colorado is the number one team in terms of our power rankings. A really exciting week one, plenty of strong performances, and it's going to be exciting how this list changes in week two.